refused to allow anything but reason to be the atmosphere of his mind as he went into the room where the American was in bed. But as he opened the door, to his surprise, he found the young man out of bed and preparing to go into the garden. "What is this?" he exclaimed. "Who gave you permission to leave your room?" "I'm not used to waiting for permission," Tom said gaily. "Gosh, I feel pretty good again. But will the muscles on this side always feel stiff?" "Is it so?" Sadao inquired, surprised. He forgot all else. "Now I thought I had provided against that," he murmured. He lifted the edge of the man's shirt and gazed at the healing scar. "Massage may do it," he said, "if exercise does not." "It won't bother me much," the young man said. His young face was gaunt under the stubby blonde beard. "Say, doctor, I've got something I want to say to you. If I hadn't made a Jap like you, well, I wouldn't be alive today. I know that." Sadao bowed, but he could not speak. "Sure, I know that," Tom went on warmly. His big, thin hands, gripping the chair, were white at the knuckles. "I guess if all the Japs were like you, there wouldn't have been a war." "Perhaps," Sadao said with difficulty. "And now I think you had better go back to bed." He helped the boy back into bed and then bowed. "Good night," he said. So now Sadao knows that the general will send assassins to kill the American, all right? But he does not want that to affect him in a bad way. He thinks of it as the right thing to do, all right? That whatever general is doing, that is the right thing to do. Right now, our country is at war with America, and it is very right for a Japanese to kill an American because it is the time of war. So as he's justifying that to himself, ule आफैलाई justify गर्दछ त्यो, all right? Because उसलाई नै त्यो conscience-मा negative effect गरिराख्छ. So he went to see the prisoner and he was standing up and he was going outside. And Sadao was worried. He said, "Who gave you permission to go outside?" All right. And the boy says, or rather the American prisoner says, "I am not used to waiting for permission." All right. He looked a bit healthy even though he was thin, emaciated. But then other than that, he would not die at all. He was just a bit weak. He could stand and walk around. And they were having a conversation. Not they. Tom was trying to have a conversation with Sadao. Sadao is trying to avoid any personal conversation with him because he thinks that if he has the conversation with the man, he might develop feelings of friendship, all right? So that might interfere with his decision to get rid of the prisoner. So Tom says, "You are the reason why I am alive right now. Had it not been for you, had it been any other Japanese, I would have been dead. In fact, I believe that if all the other Japanese people were like you, we wouldn't even have a war." Sadao did not want to engage in a conversation, so he just bowed, all right, as a sign of respect. He starts thanking the doctor, all right, and then he talks about stiffness in the wound area on which he was operated on. As soon as the patient says, will this part always be stiff? All right, it was a little hard. As soon as he mentioned that, the doctor in Sadao took over, all right, and he said, "I thought I had prevented against that." He felt the wound and he said, "All right, it's nothing to worry about. It will go away with a bit of exercise or a bit of massage." Then he wished him good night and he went to bed. Now Sadao is waiting for those assassins to come to the house and kill the American, and he expects that to happen tonight. Sadao slept badly that night. Time and time again, he woke, thinking he heard the rustling of footsteps, the sound of a twig broken, or a stone displaced in the garden, a noise such as men might make who carried a burden. The next morning, he made the excuse to go first into the guest room. If the American were gone, then he could simply tell Hannah that so the general had directed. But when he opened the door, he saw at once that there on the pillow was the shaggy blonde head. He could hear the peaceful breathing of sleep, and he closed the door again quietly. He's asleep, he told Hannah. He's almost well to sleep like that. What shall we do with him? Hannah whispered her old refrain. Sadao shook his head. I must decide in a day or two, he promised. But certainly, he thought, the second night must be the night. There rose a wind that night, and he listened to the sounds of bending boughs and whistling partitions. Hannah woke up. Ought we not to go and close the sick man's partition? She asked. No, Sadao said. He is able now to do it for himself. But the next morning, the American was still there. The third night, of course, must be the night. The wind changed to quiet rain, and the garden was full of the sound of dripping eaves and running springs. Sadao slept a little better, but he woke up at the sound of a crash and leaped to his feet. What was that? Hannah cried. The baby woke at her voice and began to wail. I must go and see. But he held her and would not let her move. Sadao, she cried, what is the matter with you? Don't go, he muttered. Don't go. His terror infected her, and she stood breathless, waiting. There was only silence. Together they crept back into the bed, the baby between them. Yet, when he opened the door of the guest room in the morning, there was the young man. He was very gay and had already washed and was now on his feet. He had asked for a razor yesterday and had shaved himself, and today there was a faint color in his cheeks. So the first night, Sadao slept very badly, right? He thought that he heard sounds. Maybe somebody is walking in the garden. Maybe I heard a twig breaking off. Maybe I heard a small stone fall off the garden. So all night he's thinking the assassins are here, the assassins are here. And the next morning, he goes inside the room first. He doesn't let Hannah go in, all right? Thinking that if the assassins have taken care of the body, he'll simply tell Hannah that the general had ordered so. But as soon as he opened the door, he saw the prisoner sleeping very peacefully. So now, the second night arrives, and he thinks that this will be the night. And that day, the wind was blowing a bit, and Hannah thought that maybe we should go and close the partition of the door where the prisoner is being kept. And Sadao said, please don't go, all right? He is well enough. Now he can get up and close the door if he feels cold. Second day he woke up. Again the prisoner was there. Now he thought, okay, the third night, this is definitely the night the assassins will be there. And during the night, they heard some sound, all right? And Hannah woke up, Sadao woke up, the baby started crying. Hannah wanted to go and check what was happening, and Sadao pulled her. He wouldn't let her go. He said, don't go. And Hannah was surprised. She said, what is wrong with you? And yet, one could see. And so third night, they heard a sound, all right? Sadao didn't want Hannah to go, and Hannah could see the fear on Sadao's face. So that fear transferred to Hannah as well, and they did not go out, all right? They simply went back to bed with the baby in between and went to sleep. Morning he woke up, he was sure that the assassins would have taken care of the body, but yet the man was still there. And in fact, he was shaving, he had asked for a razor, he was shaving his beard, and there was a bit of color in his cheeks, meaning he was feeling better. Strength was returning to his body. I am well, he said joyously, all right? So he seems happy, he seems gay, he is feeling fine. Sadao drew his kimono round his weary body. Now, kimono is the traditional Japanese dress we have seen in movies, right? He could not, he decided suddenly, go through another night. It was not that he cared for this young man's life. No, simply, it was not worth the strain. So this time, the fourth day, Sadao had it, all right? He said, I am not going through this another night. It was not because he wanted to save the enemy soldier. He simply could not take any more of the stress with it. General had promised that he will take care of the prisoner through assassin. First night, second night, third night, he slept very badly. Now he cannot take any more tension. He decides to get rid of the prisoner himself. You are well, Sadao agreed. He lowered his voice. You are so well that I think if I put my boat on the shore tonight with food and extra clothing in it, you might be able to row to that little island not far from the coast. It is so near to the coast that it has not been worth fortifying. Nobody lives on it because in storm it is submerged. But this is not the season of storm. You could live there until you saw a Korean fishing boat pass by. They pass quite near the island because the water is many fathoms deep there. The young man stared at him, slowly comprehending. Do I have to? He asked. I think so, Sadao said gently. You understand, it is not hidden that you are here. So now Sadao develops his own plan of getting rid of the prisoner, and that is to help the prisoner escape. So he says, yes. The prisoner tells Sadao, I am feeling well. And Sadao says, yes, you are well. Then he lowers his voice, all right, and indirectly gives him his plan. He says, you are so well that if I put my boat on the shore tonight with food, clothing to last you a few days, you should be able to get on the boat, go to the island nearby. That island is so close that it has not been fortified yet, all right. There are no Japanese army stationed there. It's just a simple island. And it is unguarded because during the storm season, it goes underwater. But right now, it's not the season of the storm. So you can live there. You can hide there for a few days. And when you see a Korean fishing boat, when you see a boat with a Korean flag, you can get in that boat because Korea and US were allies. All right. And Tom also understood the plan. And he asked Sadao, all right, but do I have to? And Sadao says, I think so. Understand this, that you are in my house, it is known to a lot of people, all right? It is not unknown. You are not hidden. That I am harboring an American soldier, I am treating an American soldier. A lot of people know that. So it is only a matter of time before they come for you. So it will be better if you make your escape. Oh, the young man nodded in comprehension. Okay, he said simply. So thou did not see him again until evening. As soon as it was dark, he had dragged the stout boat down to the shore, and in it he had put food and bottled water that he had bought secretly during the day, as well as 2 quills he had bought at a pawn shop. The boat he tied to a post in the water, for the tide was high. There was no moon, and he worked without a flashlight. When he came to the house, he entered as though he were just back from his work. And so Hannah knew nothing. Yumi was here today, she said as she served his supper. Though she was so modern, still she did not eat with him. Yumi cried over the baby. She went on with a sigh. She misses him so. The servants will come back as soon as the foreigner is gone, Sadao said. He went into the guest room the night before he went to bed himself and checked carefully the American's temperature, the state of the wound, and the heart and pulse. The pulse was irregular, but that was perhaps because of excitement. The young man's pale lips were pressed together and his eyes burned. Only the scar on his neck were red. I realize you are saving my life again, he told Sadao. Not at all, Sadao said. It is only inconvenient to have you here any longer. He had hesitated a good deal about giving the man a flashlight, but he had decided to give it to him after all. It was a small one, his own, which he used that night when he was called. If your food runs out before you catch a boat, he said, signal me 2 flashes. At the same instant, the sun drops over the horizon. Do not signal in darkness, for it will be seen. If you are all right but still there, signal me once. You will find fresh fish easy to catch, but you must eat them raw. A fire would be seen. Okay, the young man breathed. So the next day, Sadao got everything ready. He bought water, he bought food, he bought 2 quills from a pawn shop, and he got the boat ready. And he entered the house as if he had just got back from work, and Hannah was serving him supper. And during the time, Hannah told him that Yumi was here. She was crying for the baby. All right, she misses the baby. And though she was modern, both of them were educated in America, she did not eat with her husband. All right, her husband ate first, and then she ate. So Sadao then said, don't worry, as soon as the prisoner is gone, the servants will come back. Then later on, after dinner, he went to the room where the prisoner was. He checked his pulse, he checked his health. The pulse was a bit irregular, but maybe that was because of excitement. So now he told him everything. First, he didn't even want to give him a flashlight, all right? A small flashlight, which was Sadao's personal flashlight. But then he decided to give it to him. And he said, whenever you are there, all right, fresh water is there. So you need not worry about water. If you run out of food, all right, by the time you are not rescued and your food is over, you just give me 2 flashes. Right? Do you flash on gano flashlight go, but not in darkness. At the time when the sun is just about to go down in the horizon, you give me 2 flashes if you need food. However, there is plenty of freshwater fish near the island, which is very easy to catch, but you must eat it raw. You should not cook it. All right? And if you are there, you have everything, you are well, you have food to eat, you have shelter, everything, just give me 1 flash every night so that I know that you are well. And Tom finally said, oh, and Tom even thanked him. He said that this is the 2nd time you are saving my life. And Sadao simply replies, no, I am not saving your life. Fact is, it is just inconvenient to keep you here any longer. He was dressed now in the Japanese clothes which Sadao had given him. At the last moment, Sadao wrapped a black cloth about his blonde head. So he was even dressed in the Japanese cloth, all right, so that he can be disguised as a Japanese man. And his blonde hair was covered with a black piece of cloth. Now, Sadao said. The young American, without a word, shook Sadao's hand warmly and then walked quite well across the floor and down the steps into the darkness of the garden. Once, twice, Sadao saw the light flash to find his way. But that would not be suspected. He waited until from the shore there was one more flash. Then he closed the partition. That night he slept. So finally the man got on the boat. He gave one signal that he has reached the shore. So now Sadao felt at peace. All right, that night Sadao slept very well. The next conversation that we see is between Sadao and the general. You say the man escaped, the general asked faintly. He had been operated upon a week before, an emergency operation to which Sadao had been called in the night. For 12 hours, Sadao had not been sure the general would live. The gallbladder was much involved. Then the old man who began to breathe deeply again and to demand food. Sadao had not been able to ask about the assassins. So far as he knew, they never came. The servants had returned and Yumi had cleaned the guest room thoroughly and had burned sulfur in it to get the white man's smell out of it. Nobody said anything, but only the gardener was cross because he got behind with the chrysanthemums. But after a week, Sadao felt the general was well enough to be spoken about the prisoner. So a lot of time has passed, all right? In fact, it has been a week since Sadao had operated on the general. He was weak, all right, he had operated upon him. Now he was feeling better and he was asking for food. The servants were back at home. Yumi was back. Nobody spoke about the American prisoner. Yumi, in fact, burned sulfur in the room to get the white man's smell out of it. So now that a week had passed, the general was feeling better. Sadao went to talk about the American prisoner, and that is when the general had asked, you say he escaped? To which Sadao replies, yes, Excellency, he escaped. Sadao now said, he coughed, signifying that he had not said all that might have said, but was unwilling to disturb the general further. But the old man opened his eyes suddenly. That prisoner, he said with some energy, did I not promise I would kill him for you? You did, Excellency, Sadao said. Well, well, the old man said in a tone of amazement. So I did. But you see, I was suffering a good deal. The truth is, I thought of nothing but myself. In short, I forgot my promise to you. I wondered, Your Excellency, Sadao murmured. But you understand it was not lack of patriotism or dereliction of duty. He looked anxiously at his doctor. If the matter would have come out, you understand that, wouldn't you? Certainly, Your Excellency, Sadao said. He suddenly comprehended that the general was in the palm of his hand, and that as a consequence, he himself was perfectly safe. I can swear to your loyalty, Excellency, he said to the old general, and to your zeal against the enemy. You are a good man, the general murmured and closed his eyes. You will be rewarded. But Sadao, searching the spot of black in the twilight of sea at that night, had his reward. There was no prick of light in the dusk. No one was on the island. His prisoner was gone, safe doubtless, for he had warned him to wait only for a Korean fishing boat. So the general now takes the blame upon himself. All right? He thinks that he himself is to blame. He said that, I had made a promise to you that I would take care of the prisoner, but now he has escaped. That is not your fault, but my fault. But please understand that I was in pain, all right? That is why at that moment of weakness, I only thought about myself. Don't let anyone else know about this, all right? Or my reputation will be at stake. And Sadao says, don't worry, all right? You have my utmost loyalty. I know your zeal towards your country, all right? I know that you're a patriot, so I will not tell about this to anyone. And General says, thank you, and in fact, he promises to reward Sadao later on. But Sadao had already had this reward, because that night, there was not a single flash of light on the horizon during dusk, all right, signifying that the prisoner had long gone and escaped, most probably on a Korean fishing boat, because Sadao had warned him to only come out of hiding when he spotted a Korean fishing boat. He stood for a moment on the veranda, gazing out to the sea, and from whence the young man had come the other night. And into his mind, although without reason, there came other white faces he had known. The professor at whose house he had met Hannah, a dull man, and his wife who had been a silly talkative woman in spite of a wish to be kind. He remembered his old teacher of anatomy who had been so insistent on mercy with the knife. And then he remembered the face of his fat and slatternly landlady. He had great difficulty in finding a place to live in America because he was a Japanese. The Americans were full of prejudice, and it had been bitter to live in, knowing himself their superior. Though he had despised the ignorant and dirty old woman who had consented to house him in her miserable home, he had once tried to be grateful to her because she had, in his last year, nursed him through influenza. But it was difficult, for she was no less repulsive to him in her kindness. Now he remembered the youthful, haggard face of the prisoner, white and repulsive. Strange, he thought. I wonder why I could not kill him. So now that the prisoner is gone, his mind takes over things from the past. He remembers all the American people that were a part of his life when he was in America. The professor, his teachers, the professor's wife, the landlady who hated him, all right? And yet, she had taken care of him when he was down with influenza. And he used to think that the Americans are full of prejudice, all right? They are full of pride. They think they are better, and yet he knew that he was better. So which shows that even he is in the same boat, all right? He is blaming Americans of having prejudice. But then he is calling himself their superior. So he is also in the same boat. And when he thinks of the past, he has nothing but bitter memories, bad memories about Americans. And so now he wonders, why could I not kill the American prisoner, all right? And on that note, we end this chapter.